We're back, and welcome back, and now for something completely different. Okay, we're still on Piaget's theory. Now, we just finished off talking about pre-operational and egocentrism and centrating on one aspect of a problem. But as a child begins to develop those abilities to perform reversible mental operations, they can, and also concentrate on one aspect of a problem by performing those mental operations. They develop the ability to see that a pizza cut into 6 pieces or 8 pieces are the same, that if you pour a tall glass of water into a short one, it's still the same amount of water, it's just the appearance has changed. And they also begin to take another one's perspective. And this requires the ability to manipulate mental representations. And so this is called concrete operational stage. And Piaget had it that children can perform these concrete mental operations, so things become a bit more logical. It's not formal logic, it's still concrete in that they have to deal with real situations. They also develop a sense of what we call class inclusion, and that's the ability to compare and work with hierarchical classifications. For example, if I say to a 4-year-old child, or we're driving past a paddock and I see 4 horses and 2 sheep, I'll say there are more horses or more animals in that paddock. And to the extent they can answer it at all, a pre-operational child is likely to say there are more horses because they have trouble thinking, okay, horses are a class of animals. But if I said, are there more horses or more animals, then by animals I must mean something that isn't a horse. A child in the concrete operational stage will say, okay, horses are part of the broader category of animals, and there are 2 sheep in there, so there's 6 animals and 4 horses, therefore there are more animals. And so they can perform these hierarchical classification problems as well. And that's really important skill for life. Now, if you ask, though, a child in the concrete operational stage, now listen, I've got a problem for you. Imagine the sky is red and I've got a pair of green tinted glasses and I put them on. What colour is the sky going to be? And I say, don't be daft, the sky's blue. And this is because in order to deal with problems at all, they still need those concrete examples. The world is concrete. There's not much point dealing with a problem, or I can't deal with a problem that deals in hypotheticals, because to deal with hypothetical problems requires that you put aside the particulars and only deal with the structure of the problem and solve that, and that doesn't really present an issue. So you really realise that you're just dealing with a logical problem, you're not dealing with anything concrete. And when children begin to do this, they move into the 4th stage, formal operations. And formal operations allow people to approach things scientifically, develop hypotheses. The formal operational person at about the age of 10 to 11 will look at a problem like that and say, oh, okay, a red sky, okay, red sky, whatever you like. Red, green, we're overlaying red with green, so red and green make the sky would be brown. And that was formal operational thinking, is that, look, the particulars don't matter, we're dealing with a structure of a problem here. And so they can start thinking or dealing in metaphors. And I've been in arguments quite a few times where somebody's pitched an argument to me, like, let's say somebody says, well, in the past, variations in solar output have changed the climate. So climate change is crap. And I come back to them and say, look, but that's a bit like saying people die of cancer all the time, so you can't be killed by a bus. That there's only one thing that can cause you to die, or one thing that can change the climate. It doesn't refute the theory of anthropogenic global warming. And they go, what the hell have buses got to do with anything? what the hell has cancer got to do with it? But I say, look, no, but the argument's got the same structure. It's the same form of argument. Now, that's formal operational thinking. Now, this is where Piaget got it a bit wrong. Cross-cultural studies have found that not all cultures develop formal operations. They don't all develop formal operational thinking because they just don't need to. Think back to the Grammar of Happiness program. The Pira that Dan studied, or our protagonist studied for so long, They did not have formal operational cognition. I'll put money on it. They just didn't. They didn't need it. It's not like they weren't capable of it. If you took those kids, and God forbid, put them in a formal school, and then they went through university, they come out with formal operational thinking. But in their immediate environment and in their culture, their language doesn't even evince it. It doesn't need it. They don't need 3 plus 4 is 7. A few and lots is fine. So some cultures where it isn't required don't normally develop formal operational thinking. And so that kind of is a bit of a kick in the head for Piaget's assumption of universality. So the fourth stage at least is not universal. We know that. I suspect the first couple probably are. And so that's the state of the knowledge on that one. Now we move over to a continuous theory of cognitive development, and Lev Vygotsky. Lev Vygotsky was a Russian. He died in communist Russia in he was aged 37 anyway, but he was fairly young. This is back in the mid-20th century. And he, interestingly, his idea was that the true nature of the child, if we start off as a purely social creature, and through our social interactions we learn to individuate. Piaget, on the other hand, suggested that we start off as individual creatures, little scientists, and we learn to have relationships and become social. Now, interestingly, Piaget came from an individualist culture in Switzerland, and Vygotsky came from a communist or a collectivist sort of mentality in Soviet Russia. And it's interesting how their basic assumptions about what a child naturally is seem to reflect their cultural milieu. That shouldn't be lost on us, and I don't think it's a coincidence. But they're both really influential theories. And of course, Vygotsky's theory is continuous. So we start off as little adults and we become more like adults without any big, massive qualitative changes. But he did really emphasise the social aspects of learning and cognitive development, and I think that was a really important contribution. The zone of proximal development is something that still comes up a lot in educational psychology today, and that's the divide between what a child can do on their own, unassisted, and what they can do with a little bit of help. Imagine tying your shoelace, or my son's pyjama top. He has trouble with the top button, so I do the first two, and with a bit of help he can do the bottom two. Now I'm withdrawing the help and I'm making him do the second one, and later on, probably tonight, I'll get him to do the third one. And his fine motor is really coming along. I think he's sharking me. I don't think he's finding it all that hard. But that approach to changing my assistance as his mastery develops is called scaffolding. And that's a really important idea in education as well. And it also points out, as social workers, potentially, it points out to us how important just a few really rock-solid and loving relationships can be to cognitive as well as emotional and social development. If we've got no one there to help us, we don't extend very quickly. Which reminds me, I've really got to take my son down the park, take training wheels off and have a crack at riding without them. Now, boy, you need help to do that, surely. Let's leave cognitive theory. I want to go on to operant and classical conditioning. Now, the behaviourists in psychology have probably been more influential than Freud will ever be, in my view, in terms of getting into organisational psychology, parenting, management theory, learning and unlearning phobias, so psychotherapy. The behaviourists have had, you can't overstate their impact. It's been huge. Now, behaviourists came along in the late 1800s, early 1900s, all the way through to the 40s, 50s and 60s. But really grew in influence up until the time B.F. Skinner was on the scene. But their idea was that we're only interested in observable behaviours, because if you learn something, you have new knowledge. We only know you have new knowledge by a change in behaviour. So learning is an observable and relatively long-lasting or relatively enduring change in behaviour according to the environment. And so the idea that it's the environment that shapes our behaviour, nothing else at all. Now, we do know that they went too far with that. There's no two ways about it. Watson went as far to say, give me half a dozen reasonably well-formed infants and I will turn them into any sort of adult you like. Butcher, baker, doctor, candlestick maker, yes, beggar and thief. I know I'm going beyond my facts, but so have proponents to the contrary, and what's more, they've been doing it for hundreds of years. So the really interesting thing there is that it was revolutionary. I mean, in those days, you were born into a station, and that's where you stayed put. They're saying no, you can be anything. Now they were going beyond their facts, and they did admit it, but they were deliberately being provocative because they wanted to shake all this up. And so in some ways it was a liberating idea. No wonder they came in for so much opposition. But we have since learned there are limits and shapes. We're not totally blank slates that anything can be written on. And it turned out not to be the case. For example, with the right environment, I can give you just about any sort of phobia. I can teach you to be scared of just about anything. But it's easier to make you scared of animals than flowers. And it's easier to make you scared of snakes than just about any other animal. So, I can give you a fear of snakes much faster than I can give you a fear of kittens. I can give you probably a fear of some plants faster than I can give you a fear of dirt. We're prepared to acquire some learnings more than others. And the principles in learning are contiguity. Generally, when two things occur close together, learning develops, a paired bond. And also that idea, what was the other one? There's contiguity, and I'm just going to cheat sheet here a little bit. While I'm looking, bear with me. Contiguity, and of course how can I forget that? Reinforcement. And so reinforcement is the idea that something happens in the environment to make a behaviour more likely. In your lecture you've got Ivan Pavlov and classical conditioning, and if I get this lecture working, I'm still going to post it for you because I've provided examples of how unconditioned stimuli become conditioned, and how unconditioned responses become conditioned responses. And I really would like to go over that with you, but this video is getting quite big and quite difficult to upload. And then after classical conditioning, now the difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning is in classical conditioning you don't have to do anything. There's no behaviour. I mean, it can happen in the absence of us actually doing anything. In operant conditioning, the environment responds to our behaviour, and that environmental response determines whether or not we omit that behaviour again. And so those are the key things you're looking, the key differences between those two theories. I'm going to leave it there, and I think I'll record one more video to finish off, and then we'll go from there. So stay tuned for part 3, where we will talk about operant conditioning. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. You've been most kind.